Welcome to Module 2, Equitable Leadership Styles and Facilitation Skills. Executive leaders must understand how they currently lead and how they have led in the past to gauge where they want to be as a leader. This module will explore why leaders need to understand the connection between their leadership styles and setting goals to become more equitable. Self-awareness and collaboration are essential skills for leaders to foster relationships with their organization and community to build a shared vision instead of assuming the dream for everyone. A part of determining that vision is to facilitate conversations. Leading a discussion on sensitive topics can be challenging and uncomfortable, but they are often necessary. I will share with you some strategies for engaging with your stakeholders to create your shared vision. Such strategies are an important way for arts organizations to stay relevant and achieve their mission. Lesson 1, Key Leadership Competencies. Knowing your leadership style increases your self-awareness. Knowing how you prioritize items, execute tasks, and engage with employees and community members helps you understand your strengths and weaknesses. When you know what you do well and what you don't, you can create a customized plan that is authentic to you and your abilities. Here are 7 key elements to inclusive leadership. It's important not to place these in a hierarchy. Instead, they work together, thus cannot operate in a vacuum. 1, visible commitment. Leaders with commitment as one of their inclusive leadership traits understand the business case for inclusion and diversity, but that is secondary. Their primary motivation is commitment by aligning with their values in a deep connection to fairness and respect to their leadership approach. Leaders with this trait have it embedded in who they are, and it shows up within and outside the organization. Leaders who embody this may have had a personal experience of being in the out-group at some point in their life, or maybe they experience significant amounts of unfairness. Therefore, they have an emotional tie to ensuring that their colleagues feel included in the communities they serve. As a leader, you talk about the importance of diversity and inclusion and ensure that what you say aligns with what you do. You articulate an authentic commitment to diversity and make transparent the ways you are manifesting that commitment. You challenge the status quo by moving beyond centering those 8 elements of normal we discussed previously: white, male, heterosexual, English-speaking, able-bodied, Christian, citizen, and middle class. You hold others accountable regardless of who they are in the organization based on a transparent system of standards and expectations. Whether they are executive leadership, large donors, influential board members, or employees who significantly impact the organization's stability and growth, they will be held accountable, making diversity, equity, and inclusion a priority. 2, courage. I believe that courage requires a little bit of fear. If there isn't some degree of uncertainty or risk-taking, then I'm probably not being courageous. So that means courage changes from person to person. If I'm afraid of heights and you are a decorated mountain climber, I will call you courageous because that activity gives me a bit of fear. But if mountain climbing comes to you with great ease, then it's not particularly courageous for you. What is it that you fear? What is the risk you're willing to take to make sure you manifest courage? Maybe you have a fear of change or of not saying the right thing. Perhaps you fear people not liking you or appearing like you don't know everything. Therefore, you don't seek help or advice from others. Acknowledging where your fears might lie can help you recognize how you might be able to tap into your courage. Leaders who display courage push against the status quo, humbly sharing their strengths and make their weaknesses transparent. It is important to note that the way your organization has always done something doesn't mean that's the way it always should be done. Inclusive leaders push against the status quo of centering tradition over progress and innovation. Maybe your strength lies in how the organization has always done it, and this new approach highlights your weaknesses. That's okay. An inclusive leader shares what they do well and where they could use support and more skill building. As a leader, by modeling this behavior, you normalize a growth mindset. A growth mindset is a way of approaching tasks and ideas knowing that failure is possible, but it's also an opportunity to learn more. It means seeing mistakes as opportunities for growth and learning instead of an indictment on one's character, skill set, or ability. By opening up the door to let your organization know that everyone is in the process of learning, applying, fixing, and redoing, demonstrates a degree of vulnerability that's required of an inclusive leader. Being vulnerable also means you encourage feedback on your leadership style. These conversations might be challenging. It may feel like an attack at times. However, it's important to recognize that there is a possibility that the way you see yourself as a leader may not be the same way as people are experiencing you. By seeking and giving regular feedback, positive, negative, and everything in between, you also build relationships that can foster belonging. There should be opportunities to get feedback about your leadership from people in all positions within the power hierarchy in your organization. That includes supervisors, managers, and anyone else who leads people, frontline staff, and individual contributors. An inclusive leader that practices courage, admits mistakes, and learns from criticism and different points of view, and acknowledges and seeks the contribution of others is important. 3, humility. You are modest about your capabilities. You can share your strengths, but you don't announce them in a way that circumvents the role of others. For example, as an executive leader, you may have been a highly decorated curator at one point in your career. Sharing that information should only occur to let your curator know that you're there as a resource if they need you. It's not to justify compromising their vision for a show because you think your ideas are better than theirs. Vulnerability is an essential component of leadership. So, you want to admit mistakes openly. This not only humanizes you, but also permits others to foster a growth mindset. Humility also means you acknowledge that you don't know everything. Therefore, you create space for others to contribute and create systems for managers and other leaders to include the voices of their direct reports. 4, curiosity about others. You demonstrate an open mindset and deep interest in others. Listen without judgment and seek empathy to understand those around you. Your curiosity is in line with having a holistic view of your employees, considering who they are within and outside the organization. This also includes taking other perspectives into account that may exist outside of what you understand to be the best or most appropriate perspectives and ideas when it comes to choices made within the organization. You don't relegate input to favorite managers or staff members. nor do you ignore information from certain departments that you either explicitly or implicitly believe are less important. For example, have you considered the feedback of your facility staff when it comes to a time frame for setting up and breaking down for an event, or how the show is constructed within the physical space? They are on the ground making it happen. Therefore, have the best insight and probably the best ideas. 5. Cultural intelligence. You are attentive to others' cultures and adapt as required. In this context, what I mean by culture are traditions and ways of being that connect to people's religion, nationality, and other inherent and external traits. How you adapt and determine if that adaptation is required depends on how your organization's mission, vision, and values align with your diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies and goals. Choices should not be made solely using pure subjectivity. You should have a clear process and understanding of what happens when your DEI policies are violated. For example, imagine your organization establishes a diversity council that focuses on creating a pipeline that develops people of color in leadership positions within your institution. Your leaders have done the research, established a business case, and recognize that there are some shifts that you can make within your hiring and promotion process to attract and retain diverse talent. A few disgruntled employees see this group as reverse racism and thus advocate for a pipeline that focuses on more white men to be in leadership positions because the arts, from their perspective, is female dominated. With an organizational focus on cultural intelligence, but without a system to filter such requests, you may find it difficult to uphold both. To limit confusion and make the decision easier, you can make requirements for people who make such petitions. For example, require that a certain percentage of people vocalize their desire for the white male leadership pipeline. Like the Diversity Council, they must create a business case explaining why this pipeline is necessary and benefits the organization. Suppose your diversity, equity, and inclusion purpose is grounded in a social justice component. In that case, those making the request have to prove that they are offering redress of harm to a historically underrepresented group. 6. Effective collaboration. You empower others, pay attention to diversity of thinking, center psychological safety, and focus on team cohesion. You can't collaborate without humility. Innovation requires curiosity. To include various perspectives that may be new to you, you must be able to be collaborative. 7. Awareness of bias. You show awareness of personal blind spots as well as flaws in the system and work hard to ensure an equitable meritocracy. I use the term blind spots not to be ableist, but instead to reference a metaphor. When we drive, we have mirrors to help us see around us to prevent us from hitting another vehicle, person, or object. However, those mirrors don't reach everywhere around the vehicle. Therefore, we have to make extra effort to physically turn and look in those areas where our mirrors don't reach. We make this extra effort to ensure that we don't hit a person, another car, or cause harm to something else. In that same way, we have metaphorical blind spots when it comes to people with different identities than we have. Oftentimes, people who have gender, sexual, racial, or cultural identities that are different from ours tend not to be at the top of our minds. We may forget to consider them. Therefore, they exist in our blind spots. That means we have to make extra effort to ensure they are being included and considered. For example, I am able-bodied and don't have challenges hearing, so I have to make extra effort to ensure that the space where I'm holding workshops is accessible to someone in a wheelchair. Or if I'm giving a workshop virtually, that I ensure that closed captions are available. But simply having an awareness of your bias isn't enough without action steps that keep your bias from negatively impacting others. For example, you can have an organization that supports freedom of religion. However, such freedom does not create the right to discriminate against other colleagues based on their sexual orientation, gender, race, or other identity traits. Implicit bias awareness is not significant on its own. It must be paired with actions. However, if you don't start with awareness and go straight to actions, you may not fully understand why you have unproductive behavior. For example, if you know you have a bias against neurodiverse people, thus believe that those with autism are less capable of managing people, simply being aware of this bias can mean that you're okay with saying, "This is just who I am." You have to have the humility to openly acknowledge that this could present a barrier or has presented an obstacle in your organization. Then take measures in your policies and procedures to ensure your bias doesn't create a barrier for others. Each of these 7 key elements to inclusive leadership work together. Along with awareness of bias, you also need empathy and the ability to be curious about others. You should welcome feedback from people at different levels of the power hierarchy within the organization. You can hire external consultants with expertise in your challenged areas to help determine how to alleviate adverse outcomes. Activity. Let's explore the application of the 7 key leadership elements I shared with you. First, watch Lorna Davis's A Guide to Collaborative Leadership. Then respond to the following. 1. What is the difference between a heroic and interdependent leader, according to Lorna? 2. Who are interdependent leaders responsible to? What examples does Lorna give for showing that responsibility? 3. How important is transparency for an interdependent leader, and why? 4. How important is it to have a plan, and why? 5. How does Lorna describe the difference in engagement from staff whom a heroic leader leads? What is the difference with an interdependent leader? 6. List 3 to 5 actions that heroic leaders take. 7. List 3 to 5 actions that interdependent leaders take. 8. How many of the heroic actions do you take? Why do you think you take these actions? 9. How many of the interdependent actions do you take? Why do you think you take these actions? Consider the ways the 7 key leadership elements are connected to being an interdependent leader. Leadership is a big job, and breaking away from traditional forms of Western Eurocentric leadership can be even more challenging. But you can do it. Take all the time you need to answer the questions and respond to the prompts. We will continue to build on your discovery. See you in the next lesson.